Hopkins paper. So, and after that we are going to have Professor Eric Kramer. I hope they will have 20 minutes each. So after that we are going to have our discussion, okay? So...
Mr. Kramer, because Hopkins is...
no.
You can answer.
Okay.
Okay, I must thank Bert Hopkins because he was one of the organizers, and it's so sad, unfortunate that he's not here. But I'm sure he's enjoying himself, drinking, doing what Mickunas always says to do, you know, to enjoy drinking and whining and dancing. So I'm sure he's doing that in Paris or in Venice, wherever he is. So I'm going to read his paper. Let's see, and if there are any German words, I'll be pronouncing it in my Indian way, because I'm the colonized Indian. I have to say that. So I'll be pronouncing German with an Indian accent. So Algis Mickunas, or Algis Mickunas at 80, an Eidetic investigation. Autumn sky in Athens, Ohio. Bodies in motion. The feathery flight of a ball interrupted by the downward motion of a human hand, redirecting and accelerating its movement violently earthward. Once, twice, again, and then again and again. Game over. The striker, thick glasses and equally thick non-English accent, asks, what I am working on. No one had ever asked me that question in my 22 years. What was I working on? I had read some Hume, Robert Musil, Hermann Broch, Thomas Mann, Jean-Paul Sartre, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, and Edmund Husserl, and was thinking about their ideas, or so it seemed to me at that time. Never having ever met another human being who had read Musil, and having no idea of how to pronounce his name, I asked the best volleyball player on the Ohio University Philosophy faculty if he had ever read Musil's Man Without Qualities. Of course I read all great literatures, came the reply. And then in response to a second question about the reader of all great literature's country of origin, I heard the word Lithuania for the first time in my life. Or so the intersection of the manifold composed of here goes the word, Wurschlingen of the Ohio University Philosophy Department picnic in the fall of 1977. In its intersection with the manifold Wurschlingen of Algis Mickunas is presented in the manifold of my living present on the occasion of this celebration of his 80th year. The office, large space, lots of dark wood and Mickunas, initially head down, in a haze of cigar smoke, typing away at an IBM Selectric typewriter, looks up and says, phenomenology. You need to study phenomenology and the pre-Socrates, and read this paper of Hume that I recently gave at University of Notre Dame. Come back next week and we'll talk. Empirical style, come back, I did, the next week, and the next, until many necks sedimented into a style, a horizontal context, a proto-invariant in my life, and to this day constitutes its basis. Read phenomenology, philosophy, literature, poetry, history, whatever, and talk to Mickunas. That first year, there were usually others in the office at my appointed time, including Joe Pilata. Often I wouldn't, and indeed couldn't say a word. Sometimes I asked a question about what the others were talking with Mickunas about, and eventually, I think I managed to find a way into the conversation. The second year I was gone from Athens. The powers in charge decided I wasn't happy with the philosophy department at Ohio University. As one forgettable, loathsome representative of those powers told me, You have gotten sucked into the Mickunas phenomenology stuff. But the department here is bigger than Mickunas. Unquote. The categoric, no, I'm like thinking, what did you like? The categorical, I guess, the powers that were right about one thing. I'd gotten sucked into Mickunas phenomenology. But the conversations continued. I'd left Athens with a large box of papers written by Mickunas. Thomas Sebum, Alfonso Lingis, typescripts of Mickunas, translation of Jean Gibser, and Algis home phone number. Soon, I was writing a master's thesis in absentia at the university and initiating Algis phenomenology categorically, I think it is categorically, in graduate classes at his master's degree alma mater in Chicago, DePaul University. Thanks, of course, to Algis, my career after Ohio University was revived there. The only thing I remember about the master's thesis I wrote on Husserl's introductions to phenomenology was Algis telling me I need to look into the length of my sentences and to learn how to spell apodictically. Is that apodictically? But despite studying in a PhD program with two Australians on the faculty, Algis remained my teacher of phenomenology, both telephonically and in person, during his frequent visits to his old stomping ground in Chicago, not to mention our time together at the annual Husserl Circle meetings. The Husserlian response to the hermeneutic critique of consciousness. Having ruled out the Husserlians on the faculty at DePaul as unqualified to work with me, I had no choice but to choose as my nominal director a Persian Heideggerian who assigned me the topic of my dissertation, intentionality in Husserl and Heidegger. It wasn't a bad topic, but Algis was my real director, reading everything I wrote and commenting on it before my official director ever laid eyes on it. It was in these exchanges that I became the beneficiary of Algis' extension of his teachers, Ludwig Landgrebe and Eugen Fink, and own extension of Husserl's thought, the distinction between introspection, inner reflections, and phenomenological reflections, the levels of phenomenological reflections, the eidetic presuppositions of the analytic of Dasein, the slippage constitutive of temporality, and the constitution of egoic identity, consciousness of historicity, and historicity of consciousness, prepositional transcendentality, the polycentric constitution of any possible life world, and the cosmic horizon of all constituted meaning. All of this I learned from Algis, and everything I've accomplished thereafter has its foundations in this learning. Phenomenological philosophy. As a PhD in philosophy, my research didn't follow Algis' expansion of transcendental phenomenology into the task of tracing the reciprocal founded constitution of the social, political, and cultural levels of the life world and their cosmic horizons, let alone his culminating and path-breaking deciphering of the invariance constitutive of the civilizational phenomena simultaneously in the background and foreground of the contemporary life world. I had other concerns, the genetic historical foundations of phenomenological, I'm not going to read that word, of eidetic intuition. So, one lesson above all from Algis has clearly stood out in my own thinking and research. Phenomenological cognition, it's eidetic, and it's eidetic. And absent eidetic invariance, the cognitive claims made in the name of phenomenology are either psychologistic, if made in the first person, or ontologistic when made in the third person. Sedimentation. eidetic cognition, how exactly eidetic cognition originates, how precisely the details of eidetic variation works, how beginning with an exemplar, the guiding clue needed to point in the direction of the variation, is found once found, how the requisite what is it, Algis? Nachbilder? Images that follow function that generate the infinite manifold necessary to yield an eidos, became ever more obscure to me. The more I sought precise answers to these questions. Husserl himself is not only reticent about all this, but the only two sustained discussions in his corpus, from both based on lectures from the 20s, are limited to uncovering the eidos of the material essence of color and the categorical form of identity. Securing the idea appealed to the phenomenological cognition of the basic structures of consciousness, eminent temporality, let alone those of the perceptual and culturally relative life worlds, the historicity of the latter, and the intentional historicity of the sin of the exact sciences, presented powerful challenges to my attempts to extend the account of eidetic variation and intuition in Husserl's examples in these lectures for the radically different phenomena I was interested in. Of course, sedimented somewhere in my memory were Algis' teachings about eidetic intuition, about restricting my methodical interest to how the matters themselves of my cognitive interest appear, and then varying what appears until the invariant responsible for its appearing, and thus unity and meaning as such is uncovered. And clearly, Algis was able to see invariant Eide in the most diverse phenomena. Indeed, it was his manifestation of this ability in my conversations with him that was behind my desire not only to be phenomenologist, but also be a phenomenologist like him. But as hard as I tried, and I tried very hard, I could never see the idea, and he apparently saw them. Of course, when I pointed this out to him, he would say, in effect, yeah, okay, given the questions you're asking, what you're searching for won't overlap with those I'm dealing with, since you are on the scent of the rhizomata pantin, is it? The roots of all things, and perhaps that was true. Desedimentation. But the roots of all things, when it comes to Algis Mickunas at 80, is a tricky business. For how does he appear? And what is the source of his appearance? Among the multitude of educators in my life, the unit of meaning, Algis Mickunas, stands out as incomparable. To find the unity suitable to the function as the guiding clue for unfolding the eidos of Mickunas, appearance and historical reflection has to be undertaken, one which traces the backward references of his appearance now in the standing streaming of my living present, to memorials mimetically preserved in ancient texts. Once alighted, these memorials need in turn to be explicated phenomenologically to the end of reactivating the originals responsible for the construction of their traces preserved in textual images, but differently sedimented in the unity of Mickunas' appearance at 80, are meanings whose intentional history needs to be unfolded. If what appears is to be provided, the phenomenological foundation requisite to render intelligible the multiplicity of conflicting but not necessary contradictory appearances of the man. From among these appearances, I choose for my analysis the two that strike me the most saliently. Others, of course, could have been chosen, but because all nature is akin and the soul has learned all things, there is no reason why we should not. By remembering but one single thing, an act which men call learning, discover everything else. If we have courage and faint, not in the search, since it would seem research and learning are wholly recollection. The two appearances I shall choose are Mickunas' sobriety and his eidetic invariant, invoking discourse. These two appearances are not unrelated, but are connected by that which is responsible for the appearance of the sobriety in question, namely Mickunas' ability to beat all at drinking, while yet never have been seen drunk by another person. The discourse in question, whether heard from Mickunas or in the mouth of another, though such person be ever so poor a speaker, and whether the bearer be a woman or a man or a youngster, is such that I and all who hear it are astounded and entranced. So much so, in fact, that we are all compelled, as by the song of the siren, to take up phenomenology. Because once glimpsed through Mickunas' words, the only life worth living was one that pursued the promised land of phenomenology. Indeed, when these words are opened and you obtain a fresh view of them by getting inside, first of all, you will discover that they are the only discourses which have any sense in them. And secondly, that none are so divine, so rich in status quo presentations of virtue, so largely, may so completely intend on all things proper for the study of such as would attain both grace and worth. As mentioned, however, I had a problem with philosophical details of the eidetic foundation of these status quo presentations, and indeed of all presentations. And my quest for the roots of phenomenology's seeing of essences, led me to the historical source of the philosophical quest for Eide, the philosophers and mathematicians in Plato's dialogues. Among the former Socrates, Diotima, and Eidetic's stranger stand out, while among the latter, Theaetetus does. And crucial for this quest was the recognition that sedimented in Mickunas' incomparability is a crucial quality that Socrates possessed, as revealed in the truth of Socrates preserved in Alcibiades' drunken speech in praise of Socrates, that no comparison with mortals is capable of revealing this truth. Only the comparison with the mythic beings, Silenus and Marsyas, who attended to the twice-born Dionysus, can reveal the truth of Socrates' appearance, and so too that of Mickunas. A peek inside the status quo presentations found in Mickunas' discourse about eidetic invariance disclosed to me the connection between Dionysus and Eros in Platonic philosophy, and this connection's role in the vision of Eide, a vision whose methodical is erotic ecstasis, conceived during the celebration of Aphrodite's birth by a father drunk on the archaic Dionysus nectar, wine made from honey. Eros ever serves the beauty and wisdom that he lacks. When demythologized, Eros appears as the indeterminate and unlimited otherness that is at once the source of transcendent excesses, and the vision of the beauty that appears at its limit. Indeed, the proximity of beauty to the incomparable unity of the good brings from eidos to the unlimited, and thus allows it to be something seen and as such limited and capable of being grasped as such. Thus at 80 does the eidos of Algis Mickunas appear to me, the incomparable shining limit of the excess inseparable from the source of all that appears, including my own appearance as his student, and now after some 36 years as friend. Thank you.